I see what you mean. Um, when you say that it's almost like countries that are opposed to the US resist the English language the most, whether they're politically isolated or in the case of in this certain case, I think geographically isolated. So something I learned very recently uh, is about the Persian language. So again, I don't speak Persian, so I'm not an expert on this. This is just something I read online. But whenever you think of the Persian language, Farsi, you think of Iran. That's where they speak the language. And it's also spoken in parts of like Afghanistan and whatnot. But the main source of Persian is Iran. But apparently, the most pure version of Persian, uh, that is most that is the closest to the Persian that was spoken by a lot of like the famous Persian poets and singers and authors like Rumi, for example.
Hmm.
That version of Persian is actually closer to the Farsi that is spoken in, I believe, Tajikistan rather than Iran, because Tajikistan is far more isolated from Iran, culturally, politically, geographically. So now the most pure version of the Persian language is not even spoken in Persia or Iran today.
Yeah, I refer to similar things happening, and like mountain tribes would be speaking, like ancient dialects. In
Hmm.
some cases, it was I forget I forget what it was a while ago, but there was some like village or group of villages out in some mountain somewhere that had been fairly isolated for such a long period of time that they continue to speak, like the type of language from what was it like 1600s, 1700s kind of era, which to whatever language that was near unintelligible to who I'm speaking. I believe it was in the Central Asia in one of the stand countries, possibly Kazakhstan.
Mm,
This was back
right.
in like
I
the
know.
2010s. I remember reading it.
And you know what? I've always thought of language as the cornerstone of cultural identity. So when you think of like a culture and a people,
Yeah.
there are, obviously like foods, like, recipes and ingredients are a huge part of it. There's music, there's also like religion, customs, and all these ceremonies. But if there's one thing that binds a community together the most, I honestly believe it's language because it is the way that you communicate to other members of your community. It identifies you as a member, and from language flows literature, the rest of culture. Anytime you watch movies or listen to music, they're all done through that shared language. And if you lose that language, then you may still claim to be a member of that identity, but you lose out on, it feels like a huge chunk of it, like um, Native American tribes, I know they try really hard to maintain their culture, but a lot of the members can't actually speak the language itself, whether it's Sioux, Cherokee, whatever it may be, right? So um, they might do like a ceremony or some sort of like ritual, a couple times a year to try and keep the culture together. They might have clothes that they might wear. But the thing is, they don't do these things every day. They don't have, ceremonies every day. They don't wear indigenous clothing every day. The food that they eat is probably not similar to what like the original like Sioux people ate for whatever reason, right? So language is the only thing that they would still use on a daily basis if they still had it. So because they don't have that language, culturally they're de facto almost like everyone else. They like Native American community members, they will eat normal food, wear normal clothing, and go to jobs like everyone else. And if they also speak, English is their default language, which the most of them do, then it's very hard to say they've like preserved that culture if the main cornerstone, which is language, is gone.
Yeah, you can't really believe in a god or believe in spirits if you have no word for them, you know. You can't experience you can't do a ceremony if you have no idea what it means, you know.
Mhm.
Having a language is kind of what makes I'd even argue what kind of makes people people in a way, you know, because yeah,
Right.
again, like imagine if there was no word for, you know, colors, you know, colors didn't have a word. How would you explain, you know, anything color in terms of colors, you know, like even if you could see it, even if everyone kind of knew what it was, if you had no words for what it was somehow, you know, it would essentially be no different than if everything was black and white.
Yes, I see what you mean. So I know there have been a lot of attempts to bring back languages. And honestly, some of them have been quite successful. I know in Israel, Hebrew, or the modern interpretation of Hebrew had not been spoken for a millennia. And then there were like several strong programs that taught uh, Israeli citizens the language to the point where now Hebrew is widely spoken. Same with, for example, I'll fall back to what I'm familiar with. Nepal, the official language is Nepali, but Nepali was just one of the languages that was spoken in the region, and it became the dominant language due to invasions from certain rulers and whatnot. But my clan or caste, you can even say, had its own language before Nepali replaced it all, called Newari. And my father speaks it, my father's side of the family speaks it, but because it comes from a Sino-Tibetan family tree, versus like a like Indus family that Nepali does, it's not mutually intelligible at all. There's no overlap between the two languages. I speak Nepali fluently. I understand not a word of Newari. That
Oh,
being said, Newari was close to being a dead language because not only would the people outside the US not really use it, people in Nepal would start to not use it as well, just because of the prevalence of Nepali, which almost acted like English in that situation. But there have been a lot of programs to teach young people um, Newari to the point where I believe there's been a resurgence of the language recently. And we've seen this in a lot of other places as well. I know it's being actively done in Ukraine right now, where like the Ukrainian government is emphasizing the Ukrainian language and actively teaching it in places to they want to prioritize Ukrainian in Ukraine, obviously, above Russian.
and unfortunately, really, is just the small native groups that absolutely shafted. I mean, you know, native tribes here in America, in Russia, there's, you know, dozens of ethnic groups also having issues, you know, with the language. Um, yeah, in Nepal, everywhere, China too. I mean, Mandarin is the state language, which is, you know, imposing on, was it being imposed over other dialects and variations.